Iran has voiced support for Spain, accusing the U.S. and Israel of using migration as a political pressure tactic. Tehran claims the recent migrant surge into Spain was intended to punish Madrid over its Middle East stance. Iran alleges the migration crisis formed part of a broader U.S.-Israeli pressure campaign against Spain. The accusations come after renewed tensions between Washington and Madrid over Spain's position during the Iran conflict. Iran accused the United States and Israel of orchestrating the mass migrant surge into Spain's Ceuta enclave, linking the crisis to wider geopolitical tensions. Iran's embassy in Kenya claimed the migrant crisis was intended to punish Madrid over its stance on the Middle East and regional conflicts. Tehran alleged the operation was coordinated with neighboring authorities as part of a broader effort to destabilize Spain. In Spain, tens of thousands of migrants crossed into the Ceuta enclave, overwhelming local authorities and emergency services within days. Iran described the migrant surge as both a gift to Europe's far-right movements and a warning against countries that defy U.S. and Israeli policies. Israel's UN envoy Danny Danon criticized Spain while defending Israel against accusations over the worsening regional tensions. Danny Danon said, and I quote, "Spain, which never misses an opportunity to lecture Israel, has declared a state of emergency in Ceuta following the crisis over its immigration policy. Maybe before it continues lecturing us, it's time it explained to the world why it still maintains colonial enclaves in Africa." Unquote. Spain's transport minister responded to Danny Danon's remarks, saying recent developments had made the broader picture increasingly clear. The diplomatic dispute followed months of tensions over the Gaza conflict, Iran and Spain's recognition of a Palestinian state. Spain has also closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft involved in strikes against Iran, further straining ties with Washington.
To tell the people of Ceuta that all of Spain is with them, all of Spain is with them, and consequently, the government of Spain stands with the city of Ceuta, and that we understand their emotional state and the distress they have been experiencing over the last few hours, especially since yesterday. Secondly, to define what happened yesterday as an attack, a violation of Spain's territorial integrity. Ceuta is a Spanish city, and what happened yesterday deserves all our reproach, all our condemnation at the most vigorous level of rejection, condemnation, and consideration. The violation and attack on the territorial integrity of a Spanish city such as Ceuta are deplorable. I don't want to forget, of course, and not to a lesser extent, the crisis of the other autonomous city of Melilla also experienced yesterday. But we are in Ceuta, which in this case is a city suffering the greatest crisis in comparison with Melilla, and, of course, it reminds us of the situation also experienced in 2021. That is why the third commitment I want to express, in addition to taking responsibility for cooperating with the autonomous government of Ceuta, is that the government of Spain will use all the mechanisms of the state, all the resources of the state, to guarantee the security of the citizens of Ceuta and, of course, coexistence in the autonomous city of Ceuta, in addition to what we have always been doing during these recent years, which is demonstrating the resounding, total and unequivocal commitment of the government of Spain to the present and future of the autonomous city of Ceuta. There has not been a government that has invested such an amount of economic resources in state investments as the current government has in the autonomous city of Ceuta. What has happened? Well, what has happened is indeed a violation of the territorial integrity of Spain, of the borders of a Spanish city such as Ceuta. And in the discussions we have had with the Moroccan authorities, the underlying issue is the self-serving interpretation that human trafficking mafias have made of Supreme Court ruling, which actually reaffirms a previous court decision by the High Court of Justice of Andalusia, which states that repatriations at the border do not apply to those who enter our territory by swimming through the sea, considering that there is no physical border, as there is, for example, when a land border is crossed. This is the situation. It seems that this interpretation of the Supreme Court ruling has spread like wildfire over these last few hours through human trafficking networks and has caused an avalanche of the characteristics and magnitude that we experienced yesterday. I say this because over these last few years, what we have seen in Ceuta, and of course also at the most critical points, Melilla, the Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, in short, also along the Mediterranean and Atlantic coast of Spain, has been a systematic reduction in the arrival of irregular migratory flows. We have been following these reports with great surprise, of course, and we sympathize with the human tragedy. In any case, this is a humanitarian catastrophe that affects everyone. At the same time, it must be acknowledged that this is a failure of the immigration policy the European Union has pursued for many years, not only in terms of migration management, or the lack of it. It is also reflected in how the EU positions itself in the world and the policies it pursues toward the countries it calls its partners. The root cause of these migration waves is the West's own policies, which included aggressive actions against Iraq and Syria. We are now seeing what is happening in Iran and Libya. Entire regions of the African continent have effectively lost their statehood. Statehood includes healthcare, the education system, and everything related to ensuring the lives of ordinary people. All of those regions have become a haven for terrorists and extremists. This is a result of the West's own policies, and today it is facing the consequences in a form that causes concern not only to the countries affected by these migration waves, but to everyone with common sense. We are monitoring the situation. We believe the Spanish government will find ways to resolve the problem in accordance with international law and with a tolerant and humanitarian approach to the fate of every migrant and all those seeking a better life. This is an example of so-called European solidarity. I will not comment further on that. They like to talk about solidarity. In reality, their solidarity today is expressed only in competing over who can take a tougher stance against the Russian Federation and who can attribute more hostile intentions to our country. But here we see that, when it comes to their own interests, it's a different story, and no one is going to help the Spanish. Unfortunately, Swiss neutrality in its classical form is a thing of the past. Switzerland is closely integrated into the military preparations of both the European Union and NATO and takes part in joint military activities. At the same time, we know there are public movements and political forces in Switzerland that advocate returning to the country's traditional policy of neutrality and shielding Switzerland from the turbulence created by NATO and the European Union. Germany reaffirmed its non-nuclear status by committing not to deploy nuclear weapons under the treaty on the final settlement with respect to Germany. In addition, under the treaty, Germany also undertook to reduce the strength of the Bundeswehr to 370,000 personnel. Today, however, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius says the Bundeswehr should be expanded to 460,000 personnel. For us, this course toward militarization is no secret. We see it and will adjust our political, and military development plans accordingly. What is striking, however, is Europe's silence on the matter, a silence of the lambs. The militarization of Germany should at least give the European community pause, given the historical lessons it should have learned from German revanchism, militarism, and the tragedies endured by all European nations. We remain in constant contact with the Turkish side. Our dialogue is conducted on a permanent basis across the full range of international issues, including the situation in Ukraine. We are consistently grateful to the Turkish side for its readiness to offer its good offices and provide Turkey as a venue for possible negotiations, especially since such experience already exists.